And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us today on our podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. My guest today is Peter Kozodoy. Peter's an author, he's a keynote speaker. He is an Inc. 5000 serial entrepreneur who is involved in four companies. His biggest company, where he serves as a partner and chief strategy officer, is Gem Advertising, frequent contributor to Inc., Huffington Post, CNBC, sort of the usual suspects there. And he's spoken at some really impressive places: Microsoft, U.S. Department of Commerce, CEO Clubs of America, on and on and on. And very entrepreneurial, masters from Columbia, and an alum of Brandeis. So, anyway, welcome aboard, Peter. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure.
Great. So let's sort of just frame this because we talked to lots of different people on the program here, author, speakers, and thought leaders. And as you and I were getting prepared, we agreed that you're really more of an entrepreneur slash business guy who is using thought leadership for lots of different reasons. So talk to me a little bit about what is the driver for you to be using, to be writing and speaking and all these things, both sort of intrinsically and extrinsically.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're right. I mean, I'm certainly an entrepreneur first. Started my first company right out of college with my business partner, who was my former employer through high school and college, and spent my 20s building that company. And we built a seven-figure company, and then something terrible happened, Peter, which is that I turned 30, which is horrible. I don't recommend it.
Yeah,
And
I vaguely remember that happening a long time ago.
Oh man, I took it hard and I just looked around at my life and I was like, there is so much that I haven't accomplished. And I honestly felt, Peter, like I had been drifting, just sort of like, okay, like this is cool. And my company grows and I had kind of bought a house and I got married to my incredible wife. But I
But
really had an
being an
awakening.
overachiever, you had your midlife crisis early, it sounds like, right?
Well, I planned to live to 120, so it was actually my quarter life crisis. Yeah.
Good, awesome. Good. There's three more to go.
Um, and when that happened, I started to for the first time in a long time get brutally honest with myself about what I even wanted to achieve in the first place, and I became fascinated with this topic of honesty and honesty sort of organizationally, and how can a company be honest about what it takes to be a successful organization and culture, and personally, I got fascinated with the extent to which we lie to ourselves, and we do it quite often and quite detrimentally. So that became sort of my passion for why I wanted to get out there and get on a soapbox, and my core topic that I'm writing a book on, and that book's due to the publisher at the end of this year.
So define for me the difference between, or maybe it's building on sort of the shoulders of giants or whatever, the difference between honesty and sort of the precursor to that at some level, although a very different level, sort of this open book management, right? So that was sort of the first crack at honesty, but in those days we weren't using words like, transparency in the workplace. But give me a sense of sort of where it, define it for me, if you will.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually define honesty in my book and in my keynote at three different levels. One is honest about what's going on in society, what's going on in an industry, sort of globally around you. I think there are a lot of people who bury their heads in the sand and aren't willing to accept how much the world has changed, and we certainly see that in clients, and it's made us have to say goodbye to a couple clients over the years. And Peter, the second level I define is honest with and about the people around you. And that could be those you've hired. It could be a business partner that ultimately, honestly, is not the right fit. Or it could be, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister that's dragging you down, that's honestly weighing down your life, and that, maybe a tough decision has to be made in order to set you free. So, that's sort of the second level. And then the third level is being brutally honest with yourself. And so I talk about a variety of frameworks with which to develop more personal honesty. One of which is the Johari window. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
Yep, very much. Yep.
And in that chapter in my book, I interview Bethany Frankel and what it takes to adopt a mindset of I don't know, versus I know everything, and how much that can get you in trouble. And so, that those are kind of the three levels that I
Awesome.
define. And what I found through interviews with the CEOs of Sprint and Domino's Pizza and the largest hedge fund in the world is that when leaders align all three levels within themselves and their organizations, that's when they truly dominate their industry, have outsized business profits, and this sort of link between honesty and business success is actually very strong.
So give me one example, because then I've got about 20 other questions. You've got my head spinning, of a company. Maybe give me a compare and contrast. Like, here's a company that's got it. They've got this honesty alignment, for lack of a better term, versus someone that doesn't.
Easy. Let's take Domino's Pizza, who went on TV about, now it's been 10 years ago, and told the nation, hey, our product sucks, it's terrible, and we're
Yep.
sorry,
Yep.
and
I
we're going
remember
to fix
that.
it.
Yeah.
And imagine the courage it took for the then CEO, Patrick Doyle, to stand up in front of his board and say, hey, we're going to go on national television and tell America our product sucks. Is everybody on board with that? I mean, could you imagine?
Well, and it was sort of funny because it seemed apparent to everyone else but Domino's that the pizza sucked, right? Like, it was the running, like, how come they don't know it? And to your point, being honest inside. So, okay, Domino's is an example of they've got it. And I agree, that takes a lot of courage, both from an ego perspective as well as a balance sheet perspective, to say, hey, guess what? We're going to tell you how bad our product is. That's I don't remember learning that in marketing 101, but it
Well,
was
exactly
incredibly
right. And go
impactful
look
for
at
them.
their,
Yeah.
by the way, look at their stock performance over the last 10 years
Yep.
and tell me
Yep.
how honesty does.
Okay.
And
So
on,
who's dishonest
yeah, well, exactly.
or
And on the other
lacking
side,
honesty?
look at Uber. I mean, I was in a conversation with the former CEO of Sprint, and he was telling me that, hey, after everything that happened with Uber, I switched to Lyft. And if you look at the numbers, the rate at which Lyft is growing and that Uber is, falling behind, it's remarkable how many people got disgusted with the way that Travis Kalanick was running his organization and said, you know what, I'm not going to support this anymore. And that's a big change.
Yeah, it was funny. I was reading an article in the journal about 2 weeks ago that the gist of the article was, it's not a coincidence that Uber is a word that's in the middle of puberty, right? Like, in terms of their behavior. And I never thought of it that way, because it's sort of an odd way to think about it. But, like, all of those behaviors are are horrible, and they're on a different track. But no, those are great examples. Okay, so let me go back to some of my zillion questions bopping around in my head here. So you've got this sort of platform around honesty. You're working on the book and all those other things. Talk me through the connection, or maybe the lack thereof, between your, Peter the thought leader, Peter the author, Peter the speaker, and Peter the CEO, and where one helps the other. Talk me through that for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question because I've had it before, and people have said like, "But I don't understand. How does that help Gem?" And I have a quote, Peter, that I've developed over the years and that I swear by, which is that entrepreneurship is 10% about business, 100% about people, and 1,000% about the self. And I think, and I work with now, so I've developed this coaching practice to coach other entrepreneurs, particularly female founders, to get to $1 million in revenue, because I recognize that once you get to a million, there are a lot of resources that open up, like YC and EO and things of that nature. And below that, you're just sort of all alone. And what I find, Peter, when I'm coaching entrepreneurs, is they start out thinking, oh, I just need to grow, or I just need to figure out how to be a better marketer or a better content developer. And what they really need, Peter, is to learn to love themselves, accept that what they're doing is enough, accept the journey that they're on, develop better relationships, develop more honesty and emotional integrity. And those things, like I said, it's 1,000% about the self. Those things are what we work on and what produce incredible growth and results in their businesses.
Okay, but that's the specific sort of issues of an entrepreneur, where your identity is often your company, right?
Exactly.
But it's not, right? So you're the X guy, whatever your brand is or whatever. But unfortunately, the reality and a lot of the statistics under entrepreneurs, in terms of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, divorce rates, all those other things, are higher than in the general population, is not a coincidence. So you're sort of saying, get true to yourself. Where I'm trying to go is the connection, right? Because there's lots of reasons to do some of the things that you're doing an author. You're probably a lifelong learner. You're probably curious. You probably enjoy the problem solving and the sort of shaping of it. Is that so? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does that resonate?
No, 100%. And your connection question is brilliant for the following reason. Most would expect me to say, well, I write 10 pieces of content and get one client. That is rarely how it works. The
Sure.
reason,
No, of course. Right.
the way I use all the things that we've been talking about for the past 10 minutes is it enhances me as a human being. It allows me to explore myself and my honesty, my truth, as you said. Guess what? that makes me a lifelong learner. That makes me an observer of other practices. I would never have gotten to speak with the CEOs I've spoken to and learn from them had I not had this content platform going. And all those things, Peter, when I take them back into my company, that's what makes for growth, development, the right next pivot, the right insights. That's to me how I think about content development and how it connects.
That's fantastic. And I would imagine also that when you're coaching entrepreneurs and younger CEOs and all that, that's a learning opportunity as well from enabling you to see the trials and tribulations and the struggles and successes that they're having in industries that you might not have thought anything about based on what your core business is, right? So it gives you that sort of liberal arts education for business, if you for lack of a better term.
Oh, 100%. And if we're not learning, we're dying, as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, totally. Well, and particularly today at the speed at which technology and things are moving and changing and all that. So that's great. So out there right now, I'm imagining or hoping, are several people that are, sort of Peter 10 years ago, right? Entrepreneur, business person, etc. But they've got some thoughts going around in their head around content, thought leadership, etc. There is no really, here's the five things that you absolutely must do, right? So when you're going into business, you have to know your cost and your margins and your customer acquisition, all those things. Give people a framework or some thoughts or things to ponder if they're thinking about going down this path based on what you've done and what you've learned.
Okay, great question. So first, know why you're creating content.
I love it.
Like you heard my reason, right? It's about learning, it's about developing relationships, so on and so forth.
But wait, let me pause you there. What if the reason is, well, I think it would be great for my business, right? That could be a reason. Shouldn't probably be the only one.
So if that's Yes, and to your point, if you're thinking I need to spend the most time in the day creating direct sales, then guess what? Creating and pitching articles to Forbes is probably not the way to go because it's going to get picked up eventually, after your 400th article, and you're going to have 3 moments of euphoria, and then guess what? The phone's not going to ring just because you were featured in Forbes. Trust me on
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I yes.
So
Correct.
if your reason for developing content is sales, then guess what? Develop sales content. And you know what I recommend to do that is not to sit down at a computer and write. It's to go out there and get a boots on the ground approach and go talk to prospects and go talk to customers. Learn more about their pain. Learn deeply about why they would or wouldn't buy your service. Because if you can nail those thoughts, fears, and desires, as I
Hmm.
call them, and you can develop content around
Yep.
those things, that's brilliant sales material that will lead to, guess what? Sales.
Got it. So it's not. So I love that. So keep going. What else should I be thinking about? So I'm not. So if I'm right, if I want to sell, then sell. Right. So doesn't mean that you won't be benefiting from a sales or marketing perspective as a result of investing in thought leadership. But it's it's not the shortest distance between 2 points, if you will.
Totally. The other thing I will say is uh, play to your funnel, and I'll describe what that means in a second, and get honest about what your prospect's journey actually is. I can't tell you how many times people are like, Peter, I wrote like a 120-page amazing ebook and I poured my soul into it. It's got all this cool, it's got technical graphs and a dissection of the statistical analysis of it. And I'm just like, and nobody read it, and I can't figure out why. I'm like, nobody read it because nobody's got time
Yeah.
for that shit. Like, what were you thinking?
Right. Well, you always say to yourself, well, who's your client avatar? And they can describe exactly who their client profiles are and say, could you see that person literally doing a page turn on a 120-page document that's chart heavy? Never going to happen. Like, why didn't you think of that?
No way.
Yep.
Yeah, no way. So analyze your funnel. Know, okay, for people who are cold to you, never seen you before, what's the very first thing you want them to learn about you, and how are you going to deliver that? Fast, easy, easily digestible. Think through the levels. Then what? And then what? And then what? As someone gets closer to your core, to becoming a customer, what is that journey? And this is the question. All right. And for those of you who are listening, you're taking notes, write this down. The question is, what is the simplest and easiest way you can give people the exact nugget they need at exactly the right time as they come through your funnel? That's it. That's the only question.
Well, and I would add to that, I would add one twist to that, Peter, in the right format, right? Because there are certain, like, I'm old school. I read books, right? Not everybody reads 250-page books anymore. So depending on who you're, if you're going to a millennial, that might be an infographic or a short form video, but the right message to the right person at the right time sounds like marketing 101 to me, but it is, right? And it is just as relevant with thought leadership and content as it would be if you're marketing a consumer product.
Well, and to your point, we have so many ways to deliver and consume content today, and that's actually why people are messing up their content delivery because it is about the basics. Marketing is built on human psychology, and guess what? The internet came and disrupted everything, but it has not disrupted the way we humans intrinsically think about the world and have emotional feelings, and like that psychology is very deep, which is why the basics, the 101s, are exactly what we need to do a better job with content.
No, and I couldn't agree more because I think what happens is you get a lot of folks that feel like they're disconnected from the technologies, or I shouldn't say disconnected. They're not, hey, I used to be a great marketer back in the day when it was print catalog, right? But now I don't really understand Instagram, all this sort of stuff. So they hire some sort of a social media expert who are really tacticians, and without solid marketing foundations and strategy, you're spinning your wheels, and I think the buyer is just really, really confused and going, I think, I don't know. Somebody's, that does this all day says this is what we should be doing on Instagram. And it's like, wait a minute, are your clients really on Instagram? And if they are, what is the expectation? Nobody's going to go to your Instagram account. And then, I was talking to somebody the other day and it's like, they were talking about a client that somebody sold them a package to go to Instagram to sell a $50,000 engagement. It's like, I don't think anybody's ever clicked through Instagram, whipped out their, platinum Amex and dropped 50K in the history of the universe. Like that's just silliness.
Totally right.
Good stuff. Okay. So that's great. I would also imagine, Peter, that for you there's intrinsic benefit here. You seem to enjoy this, right? So what would you say to someone that, oh man, I don't like to write. This is a struggle. I hate the way my voice sounds on when I'm on video. How would you coach them to maybe give it a whirl?
Yeah, that's what a great question. I mean, I always encourage people to play to their strengths and to do something that's innocuous. So let me give you a couple examples. Russell Brunson, founder of ClickFunnels, will tell you that he will say, I'm kind of an awkward guy, and I don't like being on some of the videos, and like, he's no Broadway star when you take a look at his stuff. And what he decided was what he could do on his way home from work every day is just hit record on his phone and talk to himself and have a conversation. And that's what kicked off what became Marketing in Your Car, his blog podcast. So that was an
So
easy
that
way.
comes natural to him. He doesn't feel awkward. He's
Right.
just hitting the button, and yeah,
And the,
awesome.
and the driving was sort of a distract. Now, I'm not saying go out there
Sure.
and drive distractedly. I'm not saying that, disclaimer. But that was his way of doing it. Now I have another client who was like, Peter, I can't even do that. And I said, well, you want to work one-on-one with clients? She said, yeah, of course. And I said, are you any good at that? She said, oh, I'm very good at that. In a one-on-one
Hmm.
situation, totally fine. I said, well, what a fantastic thing. Here's what I want you to do. The next time you're on a prospect call or a client call, or even have a friend that you're talking to, set up a camera on a tripod, hit record, sit back down on the couch and have your conversation. And that's it, because that's what you're good at. So play to what you can do and just capture it and throw it up. We're no longer in a period where everything needs to be glossy and the photo needs to be
Yep.
perfect. In fact, it's quite the opposite, that the more raw and real we can be, the more people are gravitating towards that authenticity.
So I love that, Peter. And I think the reality is there are so many different formats, and there's something for everyone. So I can speak for myself. I've written hundreds of blogs, and it's not something I particularly enjoy. Sometimes they're fun, but when I look at my to-do list of 20 things to do, it would typically always move to the bottom, which would tell me it's not really something I enjoy as much.
Yep.
And then I sort of hit my groove a little bit more on the podcast side because I just like talking to people, right? It's what I do all day with my clients. We're having conversations where we're figuring out problems. This is no different than a conversation I'd love to have with you offline. So I'm like, okay, some might call it lazy. Some might call it just sort of finding your lane. And, for some, video's easy. For some, writing is really, if you're more introverted and you love to write, that's a way to sort of work things out. Great, great advice there. As we wrap up here, give me one or two surprises that either positive or negative that have been sort of oh shit moments for you along the way.
Oh, yeah, here's one. I built a multi-million dollar company and sat back and looked at it and said to myself, holy shit, I built the wrong company. Um, it was built.
And can you go back to Target and exchange it, or how does that work?
Yeah, very good question. That was really surprising, and part of what helped me do that was being at Columbia Business School and sort of the mindset of an institution that teaches business management as in a build and manage an asset that will make you wealthy rather than build and manage something based on passion. So, having that perspective, it was like, oh, right, I've built something that I'm really passionate about, but it's a hard sell. The clients aren't that sticky. It's not scalable. It didn't have any of the check boxes. And luckily, through EO and the entrepreneurs that I know who have grown and successfully sold businesses, I've listened carefully to because they can't sit at home on their couch in their underwear, so they got to go back and do something else. And invariably, they have a checklist of items. No, and invariably it contains the following: 0 employees, highly scalable, can work from anywhere. This list. And when I thought about that versus what I had built, I was like, wow, the company I've built is so much harder than it needs to be. And if I had thought more strategically about it, I mean, I was in my 20s, so I need to forgive myself that. But let me tell you
Sure.
now, I'm just about to build an entirely new company from scratch, which is much more strategic in the sort of the checklist of things that will build the wealth, lifestyle, and quite frankly, happiness that I think I honestly want in my life.
Well, and those things for the most part aren't on our radars. I mean, I built my first company in my 20s as well, and I have that checklist still of the things I would never do again.
Right.
And I've stuck to it in subsequent companies that I've built because it was a great success, a 7-figure business. We had an exit, blah 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 blah. But there were things about it that I absolutely hated.
Mm.
And would never ever 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 do again. Even though it was incredibly profitable and it looked like an amazing success on the outside,
Yep.
you could be miserable on the inside. So, which
100%.
which yeah, which is, I guess that's what your 20s is for. But anyway, this has been amazing, Peter. I feel like we can go on for hours, but most people would probably tune out. But I appreciate your honesty, actually, and your transparency. And I think it's the way you described that, the book and that platform really resonated. So I thank you. Thank you for
Uh,
joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.